as leading the service rather than filling the pulpit. The message is nothing more than Joanne's thoughts on the lessons of today. I think that the words that grab us in the New Testament lesson are, for many are called, but few are chosen. I was surprised to learn from footnotes in my Bible that those very words appear in quite a different parable. In Matthew chapter 20. That's the parable of calling workers to the vineyard at different times, and those who came last got exactly the same payment as those who came first. The idea of many being chosen, many being called, but few chosen, it was an idea so familiar to the Jewish people. Bob Moore pointed out in one of his messages that very few of the Israelites who were called out of Egypt actually got to the Promised Land. They were in the wilderness for 40 years. And indeed, even Moses himself did not get to see the Promised Land. Along with the cycles of birth and death, there was also punishment exacted. And yes, you can believe that punishment was exacted after the making of the calf and the worshiping of the calf that we heard about this morning. I very much enjoyed that part of the Old Testament lesson where Moses argued with God, and he won. God did not completely destroy the Israelites, but yes, punishment was exacted. And I'm sure there was the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Many were killed after the golden calf incident. So while the phrase, many are called but few are chosen, was certainly not foreign to his audience, who were afraid of Jesus, and particularly to the chief priests and the Pharisees, who were afraid of Jesus' teachings. Let's look at the parable of the marriage of the king's son in its entirety. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king. We are tempted to say God, which made a marriage for his son. May we say Jesus. And he sent forth his servants to invite presumably those who were closest to him to the celebration, which would be ordinary for a wedding feast. But they would not come. No wonder the chief priests and the Pharisees were alarmed. And the king again sent servants to invite others to the celebration, apparently still those who knew the king. But they made light of the invitation and gave the most ordinary of excuses. I have to go back and tend my farm. I'm still minding my store. And now we are the ones who should be swooning in our seats. How many times have we been too busy to celebrate God's kingdom? And what have we missed by being too busy? Worse yet, some of those invited were hateful to the king's slaves and even killed those slaves. Killing the king's servants is certainly a far cry from simply ignoring them. And the king deals harshly with the murderers. He brings out his armies and utterly destroys the murderers and burns their cities. Okay, are you like me? I in the New Testament. But yes, punishment will be exacted. The New Testament teaches us that God is a God of mercy. But we have to be repentant and truly sorry for any wrongdoings. The people who killed the servants obviously were not. The king, still wanting to have a celebration for his son, sent more slaves into the highways to people who had never thought to be invited by the king. And the slaves called them to the celebration. He invited all, the good and the bad, and they came and they celebrated at the marriage feast. But the king saw one man not dressed suitably for the celebration. That man wanted to come, but didn't want to put out any effort to join in the celebration, nor could he offer any excuse. Perhaps he thought he wouldn't be caught, and he was speechless, but he was bound and thrown out, resulting in the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Many lessons in this parable, but I think we need to look at the whole parable. One of the most dangerous things to do with Bible lessons is to take them out of context. First of all, the king was persistent. God is persistent in calling people. He didn't give up when those he invited first made light of it. He didn't even give up when excuses were given. He did punish when those he invited killed his slaves, and he punished with death and destruction. But still, he did not give up. And he sent his slaves out to call even those who did not know the king. And the servants invited all the people they found. The king was inclusive. Both the good and the bad came. And now that there were guests, there could be a celebration. There was one poor fellow who didn't dress for the occasion. One of the Bible studies I looked at even pointed out that he probably didn't have time to find a wedding garment if he was just out on the streets when he was invited. And the Bible says that the poor man was speechless. Nevertheless, he was bound and thrown out into the outer darkness, to the weeping and gnashing of teeth. If he came to the celebration, he should be willing to be part of the celebration. The words that seem so terrifying to us, many are called, but few are chosen. How can I be one of the chosen? This parable does indeed take the terror out of those words. God calls us to his kingdom and there to celebrate. Who is doing the choosing? We are. God calls us, the good and the bad, and the good and the bad in each one of us. All we need to do is to accept the invitation and to accept it in the spirit of celebration.